Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I want to make a confession that originally I was not planning on having a class today. We just went through the holiday and things were hectic and wasn't too much time to prepare. But then guilt got to me. We just celebrated the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and the day after, we're already going to take it easy and not study Torah. It just didn't sit right. So guilt is not so bad. We have to thank Jewish mothers for giving us the power of guilt, which is a good thing when it motivates you to do more. When it makes you depressed, then that's when guilt is a negative. Today is also a holiday. The day after every major holiday, the three joyous holidays, is called Isru Chag. Isru means the attachment to the festival. In Judaism, besides the festival itself, there's the preparation for it, and there's the extension of it. We don't like to go through an intense spiritual experience and just go cold turkey into mundane, everyday type of experience. This happens every Shabbos. Shabbos is over. We ate 3 heavy meals. At least 2 of them are heavy meals. And then Shabbos is over. So what do we do when Shabbos is over? Let's eat again. Let's have a malava malka. That means escorting the queen. Shabbos is called a queen. When the queen leaves, you have to do something to show that you're taking leave of the queen. So we have another meal. So we extend the Shabbos into the weekdays. And the same thing is true with holidays. We extend the holiday into the weekday. So it's customary on today, what do you do extra? You eat a little bit extra. You know, the famous saying is, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. That's the Jewish response to anti-Semitism, but it's also the response to joy, spiritual joy. The ultimate goal of spiritual joy is to translate it into a physical action, so that there is no dichotomy between the spiritual and the physical. That's one of the lessons of the holiday of Shavuos, that God came down on Mount Sinai. He didn't raise us up to the heavens. He could have done that. That He brought Himself and the Torah down to us. So I thought of what topic can we talk about now that Shavuos is over. And the last thing you would want to not talk about is Torah. So I thought we'll talk about why do we obsess over Torah. When I say we, I mean the Jewish people for 3,300 years. Whatever Jews did or did not do right, and even as they strayed from Judaism, one thing was a constant. There was always this devotion to the study of Torah. There were people who are totally anti or irreligious that I'm aware of, who are steeped in the study of Torah. It just became such a natural pastime for Jews. My father, of blessed memory, told me that he was once in Atlantic City, not to gamble, but to help build a mikveh there. And someone introduced him to a Jew who studied in one of the major academies of learning in Europe, but he was a total heretic. He didn't believe in anything. He didn't observe the Sabbath he didn't keep anything. But every day he would go to the beach and he would study Talmud and write his commentary on the Talmud. And my father was told that this man knows the whole Talmud by heart, word for word, and as well as Rashi's commentary word for word. That's as if swallowing Encyclopedia Britannica 5 times over. And the gist of every Tosfos commentary as well, not the words. My father was skeptical, so he tested him, and it was indeed, he knew the Talmud by heart word for word. Here's a man who didn't believe in it, but he was so steeped in it. It's part of Jewish consciousness to study Torah. So Of course, that's not the ideal. The ideal is for Torah to teach you how to live your life and not just study for the sake of its intellectual appeal. But in order to understand the appeal of Torah and why there was so much an obsession for it, let's start, first of all, by mentioning something that's very basic to Judaism, and that is that you can't separate Torah from the Jewish people. You can't separate Torah from existence. The most important historical event was when we got the Torah at Mount Sinai. Denial of Sinai, I'm not going to belabor this point, I just wanted to mention this. We get very upset when anti-Semites deny the Holocaust. To deny what happened at Sinai is 1,000 times worse than denying the Holocaust. Because if the Holocaust didn't happen, we wouldn't be so upset. But if Sinai didn't happen, we wouldn't be here to say we're upset or not upset. There would be no Jewish people. There would be no Judaism. There would be no purpose in life. Rabbi Sadia Gaon, the 10th or 11th century Jewish leader, Talmudist, philosopher, he was the Maimonides before Maimonides. And he writes one of his famous sayings, "Our nation is only a nation because of its Torah. If we abandon the Torah, I guarantee you the state of Israel will not exist. No question about it. Without the Torah, it wouldn't exist." And that's why anti-Semites, what do they try to do in hurting the Jewish people? Even if they didn't try to kill us, they banned the study of Torah. The Romans, for example, after they destroyed the temple, they massacred well over 1 million Jews, men, women, and children. They were the most evil, barbaric people in the world. But that wasn't enough for them. After they destroyed us physically, they banned the study of Torah for all those who survived. The famous sage Rabbi Akiva was one of the 10 martyrs who was murdered precisely because he defied that rule, and he taught Torah to the Jewish people. And he used an analogy. He used a parable of the fox who was near the water and was hungry for fish. And he says to the fish, "Why are you scurrying about? Why don't you come on dry land and you'll be safe from the nets of the fishermen?" And the fish tell the fox, "You sly fox, you think you're so smart. We know what you want. If we couldn't be safe and secure in the water, which is the source of our life, you expect us to be safe outside of the water?" And Rabbi Akiva said the same thing is true with Torah. If we could be in danger studying Torah, which is our life source, how much more so would we be destroyed and lost if we don't have the Torah, which is likened to the water for a fish. When we talk about what was given at Mount Sinai, we're actually given two things: Torah and mitzvahs. The study of Torah and the observance of the commandments. Now, to be sure, there's a commandment to study Torah. But in addition to the commandment to study Torah, the idea of studying Torah as an independent pursuit, separate from the observance of the commandments. These are two categories. They're obviously intertwined and interwoven, but they're two separate categories. Today we're focusing primarily on Torah study as an independent pursuit and why there's such an obsession with it. Why were Jews so obsessed with study of Torah that they devoted their entire lives to the study of Torah? I once saw someone give a description of life in Eastern Europe, in Poland, Lithuania, Russia, Hungary, one of those places where Jews lived throughout the last few hundred years. Here's an image. A simple Jew wakes up early in the morning. He goes to work after he finishes his morning prayers and so on, and he works a long day, not 9 to 5, but 8 till 7. And what does he do after the long day's work? He goes to shul before he comes home. And what does he do in shul? He davens mincha, the afternoon service, and Ma'ariv, the evening service, and he stays for an hour to study Talmud. And then he goes home. Now imagine, let's change the imagery. You have a coal worker in West Virginia, a laborer. He works very hard. And after his day of work, instead of going home, he goes to the library to study Socrates and Aristotle and Plato. Could you imagine that happening? No, that wouldn't happen. So even a Jew who was not steeped in learning and had to work the same time expanse as anyone else couldn't imagine going home without studying Torah at least for an hour before going home. That's something that is unique to the Jewish people. You know, if you expect a PhD person who's steeped in scientific research might decide not to go home but to go to the laboratory, that we can understand. But an average Jew should consider learning Torah being more important than anything else. That's unique to the Jewish people. And there are so many stories of great people whose passion for Torah was legendary. I told the story many times. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, the famous Hasidic master, who's known primarily for his heart. Here's a man who's, if you have to draw a cartoon, a caricature of him, it would be one huge heart with little legs and little arms. He was like the most passionate, loving person in all of Jewish history, one could say. The stories that are told about him uniquely, is the way his passion, his love for God, his love for his fellow, his love for Judaism. He was extremely passionate about things. He was so passionate that when he would hear the teachings of his master, of his teacher, he became so passionate about it that he literally started to roll on the ground. He never heard the end of the lecture because he was so ecstatic that so here's a man who was just total heart and passion, but he was also a brilliant scholar. And the story is told in his late year, he passed away about 2 weeks after Yom Kippur, and this seems to have happened in the last Yom Kippur of his life. And his family was very worried about him because he fasted, even though if your life is in danger, you were allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. He felt he could fast, but they were very concerned. Right after the fast was over, he started saying, "I'm famished, I'm so thirsty." So they rushed to the kitchen and they brought him a glass of water, and he was sitting and he opened up a volume of the Talmud, the Talmud tractate called Sukkos, that deals with the mitzvah of Sukkah, which would be the next holiday. So they put the glass of water down, and he's studying, and he ignores them. And an hour later, they hear him say, "Oh, I'm so thirsty." And they bring him another glass of water, and they see the other one wasn't touched. And this repeated itself throughout the entire night. Didn't break his fast, didn't drink a drop of water after fasting 26 hours. In the morning, they saw that he had finished that volume of the Talmud. He would study the entire volume that night. And they asked him, "What happened? You said you were thirsty." He says, "Thirsty? For water? No, for Torah. All Yom Kippur I was praying. I wasn't able to study any Torah. So I was so thirsty I couldn't get enough of it." I heard this from someone who knew the person who knew this rabbi, who's a rabbi in Poland, the city of Tarnopol, I believe. And he was ill for a few weeks. And he couldn't study Torah because he was so sick. When he finally recovered, the first thing he did is he opened up a volume of the Talmud and he put his head in it like a man who had not had water in 3 days and was drinking water. He was just couldn't get enough of the water, of the study of Torah. It was such a passionate thing for him. There are so many other stories that we'd have to spend hours and hours just going through these stories to describe the extent to which Jews, even non-scholars, would just study Torah and have an insatiable thirst for it. Where do we know that you're supposed to study Torah? It's in the Shema. We say this every day, several times a day. "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall speak of them while you sit at home, while you walk on the way, when you go to bed, and when you get up." This is one of many biblical verses that speak about the importance of learning Torah, and learning Torah all the time. Whenever you have a free moment, you devote it to the study of Torah. I told you the story of Rabbi Akiva and the fish, but the Talmud says something else about Torah. This maybe adds an important dimension to it. We are in the end of the book of Deuteronomy. There's a famous verse that says, "Torah tzivo lanu Moshe." The Torah was given to us, commanded to us by Moses. Morasha, an inheritance to the assembly of Jacob. So the word morasha, which means inheritance, could also be spelled, could also be read because of the vowels don't exist in the Torah. So every word in the Torah can be read several ways. And the Talmud reads it, Mu'orasa. The Torah is betrothed to us. We are married to the Torah. It's a marital relationship and a good marriage. And we're in love with our spouse. The Torah is our spouse. And that's how these people viewed the Torah. This was not just an intellectual exercise. This was something that was as close to them as their own spouse. And sometimes the Torah is referred to as a love letter. What happens if you're estranged, you're far away physically from a loved one, and you haven't seen your spouse or your parents or your children for months and months, and then a letter comes, a love letter, expressing how much love they have for you. You can't get enough of that letter. You'll read it and reread it and reread it. That's why people who have studied different parts of the Torah would study the same teachings over and over again. How many times could you read a text, a book, over and over again? You buy a novel and you read it, and then you finish reading it, you read it again and again and again. That doesn't happen too often, because it's just information that you find interesting. So if you already know it, you're not going to do it again. You know what's interesting? A singer, I once heard, pointed out, his brother was a lecturer. So I don't remember, I heard it from the lecturer or from the singer, but I think the lecturer said it. Why is it, if I repeat my lecture a second time, people are bored, they don't want to hear it? My brother, who's a singer, he sings the same songs over and over again, and everyone is excited to hear it. He says, because when it's a song, there's a certain appeals to a part of your soul that you just feel excited about it, no matter how many times it's repeated. And the Torah is referred to as a song. In the end of Deuteronomy, the Torah is referred to as a song, the song of Torah. So to a person who really appreciates Torah, it's not just an intellectual exercise, it's a song, a beautiful song that you could read over and over again. When a child, the first opportunity that you have to give a blessing to a child at the bris, at the circumcision, what is the blessing? We say, just as you entered into the covenant, so shall you grow up to be to Torah, to the wedding, and to good deeds. The first thing you tell the child after the child is inaugurated, so to speak, is that we bless you that you should be open to the Torah. That's the very foundation. And a child is taught Torah even before the child has any understanding of what he's being taught. We teach a child the words of Torah, and later on, as the child matures, the child is given more and more knowledge. In the olden days, and even today, you find mothers, when they rock their babies to sleep, they'll sing a song, and in the song they have the expression, Torah is the bestest chayra. Torah is the best merchandise. And that's what you tell a little child when you're putting the child to sleep, to inculcate the idea that Torah is just, there can't be anything better than Torah. There's a riddle. What's better than Torah? Dead people eat it all the time, and if a living person were to eat it, he would die. The answer is nothing. Nothing is better than Torah. Dead people eat nothing, and living people eat nothing. They wouldn't survive. Now, we said before that at Sinai we got the Torah, the knowledge of the Torah, and we also got the commandments, the mitzvahs. What happens if they conflict? What happens if I'm studying and someone walks in here and says, I need some help in fixing a flat tire or whatever. Could you please come out and help me? Do I say, I'm sorry, I'm studying Torah, I can't help you? Or do I go out and help them? What do you think? Anyone say not to? No votes for not to? Well, if you voted not to, you would also be right. It depends. That's a very important word in Judaism. It depends. It depends on the situation. If, let's say, two of you are studying Torah, and he only needs one person to help, one of you should go out and help, because there's no one else who can do it. But once that person is helping, the one who is studying Torah is not allowed to interrupt to help, because Torah trumps the commandments when the commandment can be performed by someone else. So if someone else could do it, You're not supposed to interrupt your Torah learning. If no one else can do it, then obviously you're supposed to go out and help. Now, the reason why, if no one else can do it, if Torah is greater than a mitzvah, why doesn't it override the mitzvah? Let's say no one else can do it, but you're studying Torah. It's more important. Because if you learn Torah and you don't practice what it teaches, that's not called learning. You know, if you study astronomy and you don't believe that there's a moon, or you think the moon is made out of cheese, talking about cheese on Shavuos, we eat cheese, and if you think you may be ignorant, but it doesn't affect your knowledge. You don't have to translate your knowledge into action. Yes?
Rabbi, isn't another reason would be, this came up a few weeks ago, Baal Haratzon, that when you're studying Torah, that's the essence of Hashem. When you're doing His commandments, you're just doing His will.
Yes, that's true. In that sense, Torah is the source of the commandments. Where do we get the commandments from? From the Torah. So the Torah is the source. That's very true. So if you study Torah and you don't translate it into practice, then the Torah study is defective. That's why if you have a conflict between Torah study and a mitzvah, and there's no one else who can do it, then you're obligated to interrupt to do it. But otherwise, Torah is more important and overrides the mitzvah. Now let's first define, before we go any further, let's first define what exactly is Torah, the translation of Torah. Here's a multiple choice: law, knowledge, instruction, truth. And the answer is? The translation, not the... Torah encompasses everything, but the translation of the word Torah is instruction. Torah is a guide. It instructs us. In Aramaic, the word for Torah is oraisa, or araita, and the translation of that is it brings light. Torah is light. And what is the function of light? Light doesn't change anything. It exposes the truth. And that's what Torah does. It clarifies our purpose in this world, and it guides us in the right direction, which we couldn't do if we didn't have light. So those are the translations of Torah. And what is the definition of Torah? In other words, what is included in Torah? Most people would tell you, if you ask them, what do you include in Torah? They'd say, well, the Torah scroll that's in the Ark, that contains the 5 books of Moses. That's true. But Torah, in the broad sense, is much more expansive than just the 5 books of Moses. It includes the entire biblical literature, the prophets, the writings, and it also includes all of Jewish law that was transmitted orally and later on put into different texts, such as the Mishnah, the Talmud. It includes Jewish ethics, Jewish philosophy, Jewish mysticism, Jewish history, and even numerology, where you would interpret biblical texts by looking at the numerical value of words and comparing them to other words that have equivalent numerical values. All commentaries on the Torah, on any aspect of Torah, is an extension of the Torah and is all part of what we call Torah that was given at Mount Sinai in one form. Implicit in everything that was given at Mount Sinai is all of Judaism. So let's talk about what Torah is, the different dimensions of Torah. Torah can be understood to exist on 3 dimensions. In one biblical verse, Torah is called the parable of the original one, the parable of God. What does that mean, a parable of God? What is a parable? If I have an idea, but the idea is a little bit abstract, so I'll use a parable to explain it. The parable contains the information of the thing that it's a parable for, the analog. Well, Torah is a parable to God. That when you want to approach God, who is beyond us, you read the parable. And when you're reading the parable, you're getting the information about the thing that it's a parable for. So Torah, on one level, on the highest level, is divine wisdom. Has nothing to do with this world. It's beyond existence. Torah does not need a universe. there could have been God with Torah without a universe. That's the most transcendent aspect of Torah. But then, God used the Torah as a blueprint for creation. The Midrash and the Zohar both tell us that when God created the world, God would follow the same system of an architect, of a contractor who's trying to build a building. So what do? You develop a blueprint and you follow the blueprint. So the whole world, the whole universe is a blueprint. The Torah is the blueprint for the whole universe. So if you look in the blueprint in the Torah, you'll find everything about the universe. Now that's not something that we can do easily. Certain people can do it. I told the story, I think, many times, but I heard this from my teacher who heard it from the professor. The scientist once had a meeting with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him this very idea, that everything in the world, everything means every idea, scientific, philosophical, can be found in the Torah. Not in the exact words, obviously, but the concepts are there. The professor was very skeptical about that claim, and the Rebbe says, why don't you test me? And the professor said later on to my teacher that I didn't want to embarrass the Rebbe, so I didn't want to test him by giving any examples. But the Rebbe persisted. The Rebbe wanted him to be convinced of this idea. So he told the Rebbe three things. One was in chemistry, one was in medicine, and one was in philosophy. And without any hesitation, the Rebbe showed him where those ideas are in the Torah. And the Rebbe was prepared to do it for any other idea in the world. Scientific, philosophical, everything can be found in the Torah, because if it's not in the blueprint, it couldn't be in reality. Unless it's a shoddy contractor, he doesn't follow the blueprint, so he can leave things out, of course, or add things that don't belong there. So that's the second level. The third level is God guides the Torah is the guide for the world. It teaches us how to live our lives, how to bring purpose to our lives, how to make the world that God wants it to become, which ultimately will happen with the Messianic age. But how do we get there? It's a roadmap. We're going on a journey. We have a destination. There are many winding roads. Most of the roads will take us in the wrong direction, and we'll just come back to the starting place, or worse, we can end up in a terrible place. So we have a guide. We have the illuminating knowledge of the Torah that guides us in our lives, tells us where to go, how to go, when to go, and ultimately what our destination is. So those are the three different levels. There's the aspect of Torah that is beyond creation. There's the aspect of Torah that's the source of creation, and there's the aspect of Torah that is within creation. It's there to guide us and teach us how to live our lives. It's the same Torah, but the Torah exists on different planes and different dimensions. These three levels can be hinted in the very first letter that God spoke when he gave us the 10 commandments, or the 10 statements, to be more accurate. What was the first word? Anochi, I. What's the first letter of that word? The letter Aleph. So the foundation of the revelation at Mount Sinai, the very seed of everything, is the letter Aleph. What does the letter Aleph mean? Every letter means one, yes, but it has a meaning. See, letters are numbers, but they're also letters, and they also have meaning. In English, they don't necessarily, when you say A, B, the word B has no meaning. It's not there's no connection between the sound of the word and the letter itself. But in Hebrew, every letter is a word. Aleph has three meanings. Aleph means master. In Hebrew, and if you talk about a general in the Israeli army, what is a general called? Aluf. So Aleph means leader. That's one translation. Another translation of Aleph is teacher, mentor. That's Hebrew language. There's an expression, Aleph chachma, I will teach you wisdom. So the word comes from a root that means teacher. So God is the master of the universe. He's the teacher of the universe. And then there's the word Aleph. If you rearrange the letters, which is common in Hebrew, where the letters, the same word could be read inverted. A lamb is a keves or a kesev. You find that quite often. So the word Aleph has the word rearranged, Pella, mystery. Yes?
Just before you said that the Torah can be considered a parable of God, can you consider the same thing with Aleph, that it also is a parable of God?
In what way?
It's a parable of God because it represents unity, the oneness of God. It represents the beginning of creation.
Right, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. So we have three translations of the letter Aleph, which is the first letter that God used to communicate the Torah to us at Mount Sinai. God is the mystery. We'll start with the last translation. What is mystery? Beyond anything that we could conceive of, beyond the universe. The universe needs God, but God doesn't need the universe. Then God is also the mentor. He gives us this knowledge. And then he's also the master. He controls the world. And that's the part of Torah that teaches us how to live our lives. That's how God exercises control over us, by teaching us what we have to do. So those are the three. So the lowest level is the level of Torah which guides us, which tells us what God's master plan is for the world. And then there's the intermediate level, is where God shares his mind with us. He allows us to pick his brain, as it were. And then there's the part of God that is inscrutable, beyond understanding, beyond comprehension, beyond anything that can be conceived of. It's the parable to God himself. So what does that mean? So when we study Torah, we connect all these three levels. It teaches us how to live our lives, so it's a very practical, pragmatic aspect of Torah. It also enhances our understanding. It gives us a deeper understanding, but at the same time, it also connects us to God's very essence. And in the Tanya, it explains how there's an advantage to Torah to a mitzvah. When you're doing a mitzvah, your relationship with God is like a chariot to a rider, or use the modern way, a car to its driver. The car does not go anywhere, at least now, until they're going to make these cars that we won't have any choice. They'll just be programmed by AI. But right now, you have to drive your car, and if your car doesn't go in the direction that you're driving it, there's a very big problem with you or the car. So a car is totally subordinated to the driver. But you're not the same. You don't become car. Car is not you. There's a car and there's the driver. And the car has no other choice but to go where the driver takes it. That's the relationship of a person who does a mitzvah. There's the commander, the God, the commander, and there's us. And we're subordinated to the commander. That's a phenomenal power that we get by becoming attached to the commander. But we're not one and the same. But when you study Torah, the knowledge of Torah enters your mind, and it's totally digested by you. It becomes a part of you. You can't separate between the knowledge and you. Where are you going to, you can't just surgically remove the knowledge. It becomes part of you. Just like when you eat food, the food becomes part of your very existence. You can't separate between the person and the food once it's digested. That's why King David says, your Torah is in my intestines. Why did he use that analogy? The Torah is in my intestines. To indicate that Torah is not just something that I study and I devote myself to it. It's part of me. It's part and parcel of who I am. So when we study Torah, we become part and parcel of divine wisdom. I mentioned that the first letter that God used to communicate with us at Mount Sinai was the letter Aleph. And that's the basis for a question the Talmud and Midrash asks. Why does the Torah, Genesis, begin with the letter Beis, Bet? It should have begun with an Aleph as well. So there are many, many answers to that question. But one answer the Rabbi gave, and it was a long discourse, so I'm only giving you one little point of it, is that when you study Torah, you read it, you're learning Genesis, you read it as a story. Or, if you want to go deeper, you read it as teachings of not giving you philosophical ideas. That's Beis, that's step number 2. You have to realize that there's a preliminary step of Torah, the aspect of Torah that is divine wisdom, which is one with God, and that you become one with God through His wisdom. The second step is to study it just like you would study any other book. You're reading the text and you're translating it and interpreting it. But you always have to know that Torah is not just what you read with your mind. The person who went to the beach to study Talmud, who didn't believe in it, for him, his Torah started with an Aleph. It means that was his only attachment to the Torah. It was an intellectual pursuit, intellectual challenge, and exciting and beautiful and wonderful. And some people study Torah for its literary value. Some study Torah for its intellectual value. That is a perversion of Torah, because the first thing you have to know before you start studying, you have to know that Torah is transcendent. That's why when do we start reading the Torah, Genesis? Right at the holiday of Simchas Torah. What do we do in Simchas Torah? How do we celebrate Simchas Torah? Besides eating, how do we celebrate Simchas Torah? We dance with the Torah. The Torah is a closed Torah. We don't open the Torah. Opening the Torah defeats the whole purpose of Simchas Torah. The idea is that we're not studying the Torah, reading it, we are embracing it in a way where it's closed, it's beyond us. We're recognizing the transcendence of Torah, not just the knowledge of Torah. So before you start reading it, you first have to embrace its essence. And then you read it, and then you're supposed to read it, understand it, interpret it, and apply it. But before you read the Torah, that's the Beis, that's the second level. The first level is the transcendent aspect of Torah. There are 3 joyous holidays, and they go in this order. Pesach is first. The holidays, the cycle of holidays begins with the month of Nisan. Rosh Hashanah is the 7th month of the year. So the first holiday is Pesach, the second holiday is Shavuos, and the third holiday is Sukkot, or Sukkot, if you use the Sephardic pronunciation. When you have 3 different holidays, which of these 3 is the most important? And the answer is Shavuos. It's the central holiday. In Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, we know there are 3 general attributes. On the right you have chesed, kindness. On the left you have gevura, judgment. And at the center you have tiferes, beauty, harmony. And that synthesizes the other 2. If in order for it to synthesize other 2, it has to be higher. All in the way the Kabbalists describe the divine attributes, all the attributes are either on the right, on the left, or in the center. The ones that are in the center are more powerful than the ones on the right and on the left. And the way the Kabbalists point to it is that Tiferes rises all the way up to the crown, to the transcendent aspect of God. Because in order to synthesize 2 things, 2 opposites, you have to be more powerful than the 2. So Torah, which was given on Shavuos, represents the trait of Tiferes. It has the power to unify everything, to take the opposite attributes of kindness and judgment, love and fear, and all the different opposing attributes, and synthesize them and blend them into one harmonious being. So that's what the holiday of Shavuos is. And one of the Rebbe's talks The Rebbe shows that Shavuos, which represents Torah, has three advantages over a mitzvah. Number one, the Mishnah says, after it lists various commandments that are all very important, it says, V'talmud Torah keneged kulam. Torah study is equal to all the commandments. What does that mean? That Torah has the advantage that it's equal to all the commandments. There's another thing, in the Talmud there was a debate amongst the rabbis. Which is more important, Torah study or mitzvah observance? And they had an argument back and forth, and they took a vote, and it was decided that Torah study is more important. Why? Because it leads to all the commandments. If you don't know the Torah, you can't keep the commandments. So when you study Torah, you have both. Yes?
Why, if it's equal, if Torah is equal
to all the commandments combined.
Right, all the commandments combined. Why then would Maimonides say that tshuva is not in the Torah? There's no commandment in the Torah to do tshuva.
Yeah.
Why would he say that, man? That doesn't.
That it's not a formal commandment, according to that opinion. It's in different interpretations of the Rambam. Not everyone agrees with that, but the idea behind that is that tshuva transcends the mitzvah because it absolves you of the mitzvah. When you repent, you're forgiven for that mitzvah. But when you talk about Torah, and also one of the dimensions of tshuva is the study of Torah. The higher level of tshuva that says in Tanya is when you connect your mind to God's mind, and that is the higher level of tshuva. So there's a connection between the two. So let's take the brain. The brain is the most superior of all of our bodily parts. You could replace different parts of your body, but you can't replace the brain. The brain is the most important part of you. But it's not just the most important part, it runs the whole body. Same thing with Torah. Torah is the most important mitzvah, but besides that, it's the source of all the mitzvahs. If you don't know Torah, you can't know how to do a mitzvah. You don't know how to fulfill any of the commandments unless you study the Torah. So Torah has those two levels. One, that it's greater than all the mitzvahs. And number two, that it is responsible, it's the source of all the mitzvahs. But then there's a third level. The third level is that when you study Torah, you're just connecting to God. And the Rebbe uses an analogy that if a child hasn't seen his father or mother for who knows how long, and then he's brought and reunited with his parent, does the child have to be told, you know what, it's a good idea if you embrace your father or mother? You don't have to tell the child what to do. The child just naturally runs into the embrace of his parent. When we study Torah, there's an aspect of Torah that it's like any other commandment. It's the most important. It's the source of all commandments. But there's an aspect of Torah that transcends the idea of being commanded. You don't have to be commanded to study Torah. Yes, we are commanded to study Torah. That's for people on a very low level, on a lower level. I don't want to say very low, but on a lower level. I have to be careful. But the person on a higher level doesn't need to be told to study Torah because this is reuniting with your parent, with your spouse, with your child. It's the ultimate experience of love. The Talmud says something that is a little puzzling. The Talmud says that if a person doesn't study Torah because of poverty, he's going to be in trouble. Because Hillel, the sage Hillel, is going to make you look bad. Why? Hillel was the poorest of the poor. He was as poor as the synagogue mouse. We don't use church mouse here. The synagogue mouse. To the point where, in order for him to study Torah, there was a fee that they used to ask people to pay, a small, very nominal fee. And one day he didn't have even the little amount of money that they required, but he's so thirsty to learn Torah that he climbed on the roof, and through the skylight he was able to hear what they were teaching. And it was a snowy day in Jerusalem, and it does snow in Jerusalem, and it started snowing so much that he was covered entirely with snow, and the teacher saw it was getting dark, so he asked him to go up there and clear the snow, and they found his body there. He was unconscious. They brought him back down, and they revived him, and from that time on, they let him in without paying. So no one is as poor as Hillel, and yet he never neglected the Torah study. So if you claim, I couldn't study Torah, I was poor, you're not as poor as Hillel. So he's going to put you in a very bad light, that you're going to be judged unfavorably. Then if you claim, I couldn't study Torah, I was so rich, I had so many business deals to deal with, I had to run, Wall Street, I was too busy to study Torah, you're in trouble. There was a rabbi called Elazar ben Charsum. He was as wealthy as you can imagine. He was the Bill Gates of his time, lahavdil. He was so rich, he owned diverse enterprises, and yet he never neglected the study of Torah. So if you're going to use wealth as an excuse, you're in trouble. Poverty or wealth. It doesn't say if you're in between who's going to cause you problems. But so the Rebbe asked the question, 1 second, if you had a legitimate excuse not to learn because of your poverty, you were scrounging for some bread to put on your table to feed your children, then you're exempted. You're exempted from Torah study if you have difficulty because of a need to earn a living. Or if you're legitimately engaged in your business, the Torah allows you to do business, then you're exempted from Torah study. So why should they be a liability to us if we're doing the right thing? So the Rebbe says, yes, if you're doing it because it's commandment, you have excuses. Every commandment has its limits. And if you have no ability to learn because of your preoccupation with whatever situation you're in, you're exempted. If you look at it as a mitzvah, a commandment, but if you look at Torah as a love affair, how could you say, you know what, you tell your spouse or whoever who you love that I couldn't do it because I was busy. Yes, you have a good excuse. Legally speaking, it's not grounds for divorce, but that doesn't mean that you have a good marriage. The study of Torah is the ultimate marriage between us and God. Okay? So let's all dedicate ourselves to learn more Torah. Even if we're not obligated, we still learn Torah, especially when we are obligated. We should devote ourselves more and more time to the study of Torah. At least, even if you're as busy as anyone could imagine, you're not exempted from studying at least a few minutes in the morning and a few minutes in the evening. At least to say the Shema, which is part of Torah, in the morning and the evening. That's the bare minimum. Simchas Torah, just reminded myself, is the busiest time for the Rebbe. The Rebbe on Simchas Torah would speak for about 3-4 hours, and in between his talks, they would start singing a song, and the Rebbe would jump up and swing his arms and dance. And here's a man in his late 80s. And then after the Farbrengen was over, about midnight, there would be a break for a half hour, 40 minutes, because they had to arrange the synagogue in a way that they can do the dancing without, it should be set up with bleachers so thousands of people could stand and watch the dancing. And then there would be the dancing that would continue for another few hours. So someone was eyeing the Rebbe. What does the Rebbe do in that half hour, the break, intermission? So I don't know how they were able to see. I guess they looked through the keyhole, and they saw through the shade, that the second the Rebbe entered his room, he ran over to the bookcase, took out a volume of the Talmud, and sat down within seconds, and was totally immersed in the study of Talmud for the next half hour. Just couldn't imagine not studying Torah when he had a free moment. Any questions? No questions. Okay, so everyone have a good week and successful learning Torah. God willing, yeah. What are we gonna do?
One or two?
No, one.
Do you have an idea when we will return to two?
I have to discuss this with my,
Secretary.
resource.
Secretary of Rabbi. He was a rabbi. Yes?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Secretary. You?
I found it.
He